Hello and welcome to Magic Theory 101. My name is Zoe Morana, and today we are back again with another podcast episode with Wendy. This chapter is chapter 6, Emotion. Last episode we went over the pushes and pulls of expansion, aka what purpose, desires, and discomforts serve for us. So they ultimately lead us in the same direction, which is toward growth. So, with any important event in our life, we'll feel some sort of emotion. So, as we covered in some earlier chapters, perception plus emotion creates experience. Experience is what develops our souls meaningfully. Emotion is the solidifier of belief. Emotion is what makes belief meaningful to us. Without any feeling about a particular belief, that belief could be changed easily. We have core beliefs, and then we have beliefs which constantly shift. For example, say someone sends you an article about a celebrity that you don't really care about, and the celebrity did something bad. You kind of don't really care because you don't really care about the celebrity, but you believe it. And then that person sends you another article saying, actually, the celebrity didn't do this because blah, blah, blah. And so you change your belief again. Like you change your belief back and forth just like that because you don't really have that significant of an emotion attached to it. But imagine you believed really strongly about your favorite celebrity that this person is a great person, and then you get sent an article saying this celebrity actually embezzled a lot of money from elderly people. You probably have some sort of emotional reaction. So, the reaction triggered by your strong emotion might be one of the following two. Your belief gets broken down through emotion, like anger or disappointment, and you alter your belief after that emotional shift. Or you react with emotion and you refuse to believe the article is true, even if there's a lot of so called solid evidence. This is why some people can be presented with so much evidence but still not change their mind about something because a person's logic is made up of their belief system, which acts as a filter, and so much of your core belief system is defended by emotion. But that brings us to the question, since our beliefs dictate our reality, shouldn't it be impossible for something to enter our world that defies our beliefs? So I would say you always have a choice. You can choose to allow a belief to break down, or you can keep on believing it, and that shapes how you see the world. But remember that the purpose of existence and beliefs creating reality is all for expansion, and so beliefs are bound to change. Our existence is bound to change. As humans, we don't live in the same unaltered state forever. So, even our everyday beliefs change. We have beliefs about today that are different from our beliefs about tomorrow, such as today will be a good day and tomorrow might not be a good day because I have to go to work. Our beliefs are constantly shifting. Ultimately, we all have free will and we can choose what to believe. And it's not a bad thing that our beliefs are held in place by emotion. In fact, we can actually use this knowledge to our advantage to help us on our journey for expansion. Um, Say that your belief was, I don't know how to play music. Maybe you don't feel very strongly about that at all because you don't feel like it impacts your life much. But say that you felt so much guilt around not being able to play music because it was something you really wanted to do. And the first time you ever tried to play music, you got told you were really bad at it. And so now that belief has become one of your core beliefs. Now it's wrapped in so much emotion like anger and sadness. And so when we look at these two people, one who doesn't really feel that strongly about their belief compared to the one who feels so much emotion regarding the belief, it is actually going to be easier for the first person, the person who doesn't really care about it, to change their belief and get good at music compared to the person who feels so much fear and shame because the second person is likely to not even try and they might take any mistake while they're learning as an affirmer for their belief that they're not good at music. So for the first person, we'd say, their belief, I'm not good at music. That's a weak belief. It's easily shifted. For the second person, the belief holds so much emotion that it's actually become one of their core beliefs. So sometimes anger as an emotion can help us break through. Sometimes emotion moving in a different direction breaks down a former belief. But most of the time, emotions tend to be what stabilize our beliefs. If our beliefs are the wooden beams of reality, then emotions are the glue and nails. So, there are actually a lot of meditations out there that can help you temporarily step away from emotion so that you can change your belief, or meditations that reprogram your emotion so it's easier to reprogram your belief. In manifesting, we hear a lot of the time, some people try to get to a state where they don't feel anything and they don't really care about anything. And they believe that this will help make it easier for them to manifest. So, this method works because beliefs are held in place by emotion, and through removing that belief, it's kind of like you're allowing your beliefs to shift really easily. And so, your reality can be more easily altered. It's not the only way to manifest, but taking down stabilizers of a limiting belief can be very helpful because what you once felt as solid is now held in place by nothing. And so it can move really easily. So, ultimately, emotions are what turn perception into experience, which allows us to live on a more vibrant level of reality. So, you can reframe narratives and practice changing your emotion. If you normally react with frustration, instead of asking, why does this happen to me? Ask yourself, what can I do to make myself feel better? Instead of getting angry at someone for spilling their coffee on you, you can think, that coffee cup is from the new place I wanted to try. This is probably a sign that I should go get it today. And by influencing your emotional reaction, it can really help you to change your beliefs into something you want to believe. It can help you believe that the world is communicating with you through signs instead of the world is out to get you. So sometimes emotions can also be symptoms like anger telling you that your boundaries are not being respected, or sadness telling you you're not allowing yourself to do what you want. I'm not saying you should repress your emotions. You should simply understand how they work, understand your own patterns, and know that you can influence your reality by influencing how you feel. Like, if you feel an emotion, I just dropped the microphone. Um, if you feel an emotion you don't want to feel, instead of finding what external reason is to blame, you can ask yourself what belief patterns you have. What actions do you take? How could you make life better for yourself just by doing things and thinking thoughts that you know will improve your emotional state? And so I really want to ask Wendy what she thinks about all of this.
Hi, Zoe. So, first of all, thank you for having me back on your podcast. And I'm really excited about hearing that episode 5 was pretty popular. We had a lot of people listen to that. So, I'm looking forward again to this episode on emotions. When I found out that we were talking about emotions today, I was pretty excited because this is also something that's resonated with me maybe the last couple of weeks. Like I've been feeling a lot of emotions, different emotions, ranging from, I guess, guilt to excitement, anticipation, um, everything positive to all the negatives as well. And it's definitely something that I feel we don't have control over, like it just comes as quickly as it goes. And so this is a very interesting topic for me. So this is a lot that you talked about just now, all of that content. And yeah, the idea that emotion gives is what gives our belief that meaning is it resonates very deeply. And I really like what you said about emotions being the glue that holds everything together. I think it makes so much of sense, that analogy. So, yeah, it's fascinating when we talk about how our beliefs might feel like, um, how our beliefs might feel if we stripped them to the very basics, getting right down to our emotions and what motivates us and compels us to taking certain actions. So, I guess what I want you to develop on would be since emotions is that important in maintaining our beliefs, how can we use positive emotions, like curiosity, um, love, hope to encourage um, change in our beliefs that might not serve us anymore? Is that something you could answer?
Yes, I feel like that's a very good question. So, you'll remember in last episode, we were talking about how emotions like excitement, curiosity, desire, these a lot of the time are pulls that lead us toward expansion, right?
Mm.
And I would say when you take emotion away from a belief, that belief means a lot less to you. In fact, if you have zero emotion associated with a belief, then it actually doesn't mean anything to you. And so, if we were to change our beliefs, I would say we should pay attention to what beliefs are held in place by fear, what beliefs are held in place by anger, what beliefs are held in place by guilt, by sadness. And we should pay attention to what beliefs might be held together by love.
Mm.
Like, there's a really big difference between volunteering because you love the cause and you want to support it versus volunteering because you feel like you're a terrible person if you don't. And so, just by noticing what emotion we associate with our beliefs, like what we feel when we believe something, even if that belief is something that other people also hold, I feel like we can really change that more easily. And I would say I would recommend a journaling exercise for people where we write down our beliefs and we write down what emotion we are feeling. Like, do we feel scared? Do we feel upset? Do we feel bad about ourselves? Or do we genuinely feel love and excitement? Like, what is the emotion driving this belief?
I love that suggestion about journaling. I think that journaling has helped me to almost like rematerialize those emotions, and then I can kind of review it when I read everything. It also makes you more conscious of what you feel instead of it just kind of overpowering or overtaking you. So journaling is I really like that suggestion. I've actually been doing that. Yeah. So I want to address how emotions are created based on different experiences and memories. And I think that is something that you would also agree on, right? Like we feel different things because of our memories and our unique experiences. And so, do we really, you did mention that we all have free will. Do we really have free will? And can we really alter our beliefs if they're based on our unique experiences? So, I mean, if we're able to change how we feel so easily, that would that would mean that we're pretty logical creatures, you know, like there would be no crime on earth, no hate, no war, right? Um, because I think that people are ultimately emotional creatures and that even logical decisions are actually they're rooted in emotional motives. And so, yeah, what do you think about that?
I really agree that people's logic is backed up by emotion a lot of the time because emotion is what really makes their beliefs meaningful to them. But I would say that I don't think it's necessarily easy for people to do something, even if they understand how it works. Like, even if you understand that if you want to be healthy, you get up for a run every morning. People know how it works, but knowing how it works doesn't necessarily mean everyone's going to do it. And so I would say that um, during the course of our lifetimes, we might get influenced by other people's emotion. Like, for example, if you grew up in a really abusive household and your mother was scared all the time, maybe you grew up scared. Or maybe you have an interaction with someone who's really angry or really upset. And then you leave that interaction and you're really angry or you're really upset. It can also go the opposite way, like you're hanging out with someone who's excited and then you get excited. But I would say that memories and past experiences, how can we define those? Like, can we define them as existing right now? Because right now, what exists is only this present moment, right here. And so, if we were to shift our focus like that, instead of living in our past, living so deeply rooted in our own memories, we can change the focus of our brain. We can change what we perceive as our current reality. And so right now we could say maybe um anything that happened in the past, it isn't here right now. I'm here right now. This cookie on the table is here right now. You and I are here right now, but um anyone who hurt us in the past, they're not here right now. They're only here in our heads or they're only somewhere else. And so, really, our only existence that we can control is our present moment.
Yeah, that's that's a good reminder, I think, for a lot of people who do live in the past. Um, I feel like a lot of people who are affected by past experiences perhaps have had traumatic experiences that have affected them very deeply, right? I remember you did mention something about blocking memories or emotions out as a method. I actually do that. So I call it the disassociation from your feelings method, right? So let's just assume, and I know there are a lot of people who do feel this, like if you feel a negative emotion about a particular person or reoccurring event in your life, is disassociation from your feelings something that would be beneficial? Um, if you're able to disassociate on a mental level to achieve, I guess, like the greater good or peace within yourself, like, do you think that's something good to do?
So I would say, first off, calling emotional distancing or distancing from your own memories, dissociation, that kind of makes it sound really negative to me. And so I would say I feel like emotional distancing really depends on the person. Like, are you getting angry over imaginary arguments? Do you keep getting upset about the same memory that was 4 years ago, but you're still repeating it 20 times a day in your head? I would say what I would encourage people to do is to shift their focus to the present moment instead of always being in the past. And this doesn't mean that we should ignore our emotions because our emotions tell us something about ourselves. I would say instead of getting so swept up in that emotion, we could put it on paper. Like I said with journaling, we can write it down. We can see what this emotion is trying to tell us about ourselves instead of what this emotion is saying about, oh, I hate this person, or I'm so mad at these kids. Like, because when you put the responsibility for your emotions on external factors, you're basically giving away your own power. You're ignoring that all of your emotion actually comes from within yourself. Your any emotion you have is either a reaction or a response to something that happens, but emotions don't really get delivered to you by the world unless you let them. All of your emotion comes from you and your beliefs.
Mm. That's true. And I think it takes a lot of mindfulness to not be carried away by your own emotions. Like mindfulness is probably something that we should all practice, but don't, right?
I
Like,
mean, a lot of people don't
yeah. Um, that's why they say to meditate, right? Because that's where you,
sit in the moment.
right, that's where you sit in the present with your own emotions and let it not affect you. I've never meditated, so I don't know if that's true. Have you meditated?
I have meditated. I meditate a lot. And in fact, I feel like for me, I think meditation doesn't have to be sitting cross legged and just closing your eyes. I feel like meditation can actually be listening to music. Journaling can be a form of meditation. Having tea or going for a walk can be a form of meditation. And I say this because to me, meditation is simply, like you said, mindfulness. It's being in the present moment. And sometimes people get so caught up in their everyday experiences and their actions being something that's so routine for them that it just kind of becomes automated. They don't actually pay any real attention. It's kind of like they're spacing out when they're driving. They're not really paying attention to what they're eating. And actually, I would call that dissociating, like living in a memory while you're eating food that's in front of you and you're not paying attention to the food. You're just living in that memory. I would call that dissociating from your present reality.
Well, that's very interesting. I thought spacing out would kind of be a form of meditation because you're not thinking about what you're doing. But you said that's not meditation. Meditating is mindfully being here right now and enjoying, or does it have to be like a positive thing, or is it like a neutral emotion?
So I would say that um by spacing out in meditation, what do you mean? Like, do you mean um do you mean that you temporarily let all the problems of the day fall away and enjoy this current moment? Is that spacing out to you, or is spacing out forgetting the chair you're sitting on, forgetting where you are?
Maybe spacing out just means not thinking about anything.
So I think that when we don't think, we kind of just be, we kind of just feel. And spacing out, when I'm meditating, I don't feel like I'm spacing out. Maybe I'm zooming out my focus from my problems for the day. Maybe I'm just bringing myself back into this one present moment as compared to every single moment in this entire day. And for me, I wouldn't call that spacing out. I would actually call that grounding myself in the present reality.
Right. So spacing out would be what you call disassociation,
Kind of.
right? Because it's kind of a form of escape. It's an escape from your reality right now into a space that is nothingness in your own head, right?
So I would say one of them is you're losing focus. And with the other one of them, it's like you're bringing back your focus instead of completely losing focus. You're pulling your focus down to this one moment. So it's not so chaotic.
Right. On the topic of being mindful and thoughts, what do you think about like obsessive thoughts? What do you think about like invasive thoughts? What do you think about that?
I would say that sort of thought is deeply rooted in emotion and habit. So it's kind of like a car going along a track. And the more times it goes over that track, the more it's kind of like the track gets deeper every time the car goes over it. And so it's kind of like habits get ground in that way. And so I would say when we have these obsessive habits, we really need to take a step back and think, why am I doing this? Because habit is what we default to when we're not being mindful. Habit is what we default to when we forget that we have a choice because it's the track that's easiest for us.
So you're saying that when we feel certain feelings that could be obsessive or quote unquote compulsive or some inclination emotionally that we can control it and that it's not something that um is not able to be controlled.
I would say I wouldn't just be like, okay, pretend it's not there. I would say we can replace the habit with something else. We can start carving a new track. Like, I want to talk about addiction here. Like, for example, say that every time a person gets sad or angry, they reach for the nearest bottle of alcohol. And that's because they're kind of not being as mindful
Mhm.
of their own choice in their present moment. And that habit is just deeply worn into them. And what we need to do instead of forcing them to stop is actually kind of to redirect them and start creating a new track. Like every time I feel sad or upset, instead of drinking, I call a friend. Instead of drinking, I start journaling because a lot of the time that emotion still needs to be dealt with, but you can choose the way you deal with it.
Right. So choose to do something that's uh positive, a positive impact, and maybe not something that is destructive, right, for you, right? Mm. Um, so do you think how we feel could be tied to like our inner child? Because some people are geared towards feeling a certain way, um, and then therefore behaving in a certain way, right? And so what do you think about like unresolved trauma affecting how we feel in our current lives?
So I feel like, yeah, a lot of people, their inner child doesn't feel safe. And so maybe they don't really let themselves express that freedom. But sometimes we're so out of touch with ourselves because we're focused on kind of riding the wave of emotions as compared to actually being mindful and noticing what these emotions are trying to tell us. And so I would say for a lot of people, their problem isn't inner child issues. Their problem is that they aren't aware of their inner child issues.
Mhm. I've always kind of wondered if therapy was actually a good thing because, like you said, when we don't think about our past experiences and our trauma and everything that's happened to us, it's kind of like out of sight, out of mind. You don't think about it. It almost doesn't exist, even though it is unprocessed, as they say, right? Um, but when you do go back and review everything and try to process it, it's almost like you relive that emotion or you relive those experiences again. And so I wonder like if therapy is even good or necessary because if something's past and you just store it away, why can't it just remain there? Why do you have to process it?
I think that I don't really think that you have to go through really hard moments necessarily where you just process all of your trauma and just have to relive all of it. But I do think that trauma can influence our subconscious beliefs. And so trauma therapy. Therapy can help us discover what our unconscious beliefs are so that we can let go of them. So it's not really about like doing some hard work and having to say go through it. It's more about becoming aware. And then once you are aware of your subconscious beliefs, you can then choose what to do with them. And as an energy healer, I can actually see people's emotions as different colors of energy in their body. And so, um, sometimes people tell me, I'm not sad, but I see their sadness. Their sadness is in their shoulder or in their torso. It's actually there as an energetic blockage, and that's what's causing their pain. But it's kind of like They have covered it up with thoughts or they've made themselves busy. And that busyness of their mind keeps them away from being actually attentive and mindful to themselves. And so they don't even realize that they hold sadness in their body because they believe that their dream is never going to come true subconsciously because of something that happened a long time ago. And so I would say it's when we zoom into this moment and when we really take a look at ourselves and our beliefs, then we have the power to change it. We have to first know, and then we have the power to change it.
So you can see different emotions in people, like it's color. So you can see mine right now.
I could see yours if I looked.
Well, what does that mean?
Um, so going a bit off topic here, but I would say clair senses or psychic senses, as some people call them. It's kind of like a radio volume dial. If you get skilled enough, you can dial it up, you can dial it down. This means that even if you have the ability to see ghosts, you can dial down that ability and you don't have to see ghosts all the time. Maybe when you want to see them, you turn up the volume, and when you don't want to see them, you turn down the volume. And so for me, it would be kind of really distracting and exhausting to see people's emotional states all of the time. And so I kind of have mine tuned down to a medium level. And in sessions, then I turn it up.
Oh, that's very interesting. Um, yeah, that's very interesting. Thanks for answering
Mhm.
that off-topic question. So I just all of a sudden thought of this question. So since we're talking about emotions, right? Do you think an intellectual connection or an emotional connection would be more important in a relationship or friendship? Like, which one do you personally feel like is more important? Or are they both important?
So, what do you really mean by intellectual? How do you define intellectual? Because we've defined an emotion previously as something that you feel, a feeling. Any feeling is an emotion. And so, how do you define intellectual?
I think I define intellectual being that you're able to communicate um, thoughts with each other like in a very easy and comfortable way, and maybe you're on the same wavelength intellectually. Um, Emotional, I would just feel like you're both tapped into that part of yourself. Whereas intellectually, you don't need to be emotionally tapped into that part of yourself. Does that make any sense?
So, I kind of think what you're talking about feels like reacting versus responding. So, say that we're angry, and maybe what you mean by intellectual is that you can still speak calmly and logically, even when you're angry, or that you can still be effective and get that point across. But maybe emotional in that case would be something like blowing up at someone because you're angry. But I would say I wouldn't define intellectual and emotional that way because I think everyone's personal logic system is backed up by some core emotions. And so I would actually call that having the awareness to choose to respond instead of just reacting to triggers and blowing up.
Right. So, kind of building on what I just said, because you said that emotions are like glue that holds everything together, right? And that also becomes kind of like the motivation behind our actions that propel us to behave in a certain way or move us forward. Um, would you say that having emotional connections with people are very important?
I would say that, yeah, in order to have any sort of connection with people, um, emotions are a part of who we are. And so maybe the emotion that bonds us to people is love. Maybe we just love each other. Maybe emotions that bond us could be anger at each other that actually still creates some sort of energetic tie. If you're angry at a person, then um you're kind of still bonding yourself to them because you're still sending that energy of emotion their way. And some people are bonded together by guilt or by fear. So yeah, I would say in all relationships there is an emotional aspect.
So you mentioned that we should change our perspectives and how we view certain things that impact us negatively, right? I think this is way easier said than done,
Yeah.
especially in the heat of the moment. Um, what do you think are like some practical ways that could help us be more mindful um, in how we channel our mental energy? Like, what are some good step by step methods?
Um I think honestly most things are easier said than done. And um I think that all of our long-term beliefs are habits. Like all of these long-term beliefs that we hold, held in place by emotion, they're habits. And so my advice would be to start small. For example, if you know you can have some sort of control, or not really control, power, if you feel you can have power over yourself in some sort of situation, then know that power and use that power, even if it's a really small situation that you feel like isn't going to make that much difference. Like, it's the difference between a small argument versus a really huge fight. Maybe in the really huge fight, you feel like you can't really control how you react yet. So we start practicing by starting with the small arguments, just by changing that habit. It's like how going out for a 5-minute walk can help you build the habit of running as opposed to just staying home and not going out at all.
Yeah, I think mindfulness is definitely a habit, and I feel like our minds can be restructured if we intentionally try to do that, right? Yeah, I don't really have any other questions. I think I've asked everything I want to know. So, thanks so much for sharing all of your very unique perspectives.
Is there anything that you would like to share? Like, what did this chapter mean to you in maybe the context of your life or what you're going through?
I think this chapter on emotions, um, I didn't really think about emotions that much before, but um, I guess like these couple of weeks, it kind of it's resurfaced, and now that I have to talk about it, I realize that it's such a huge, uh, like pull energy, and that it can reshape your life if you really just listen to your emotions. And I'm not sure sometimes if these emotions are even reliable to follow or listen to, you know? I guess it's also like a logic versus emotions thing. Do you think with your head or do you think with your heart? And I think that's something that I struggle with.
So I don't really separate emotion and logic. I think that um the important thing is how we're feeling. Do we let ourselves acknowledge what we feel, or do we try to live by other people's logic, society's logic, instead of our own? And when we're feeling an emotion, like, do we acknowledge that it's there? Because really, we can't trust an emotion to tell us something about the external world. Like, if you get angry at someone, we might not always be able to trust that this emotion can tell us that that person is a bad person because you're angry at them. But emotions can always tell us something about ourselves. So we could say, oh, I'm getting angry because this person did something which triggered one of my traumas, or I'm getting angry because I'm not reinforcing my boundaries. So I would say emotions are reliable in that they can tell us about ourselves, but I wouldn't call them reliable if you were to say my emotions can necessarily tell me um tell me cold hard facts about the world around me. Because really what we're trying to do in this episode is just to pull back to the center of ourselves.
Do you think when we feel powerful emotions about something, for example, the feeling of love, for example, that we should allow it to dictate our lives and make certain decisions for us?
So that's a really interesting question. I would say, does it feel like you have a choice? Does it feel like this is a conscious choice that you're making? Because with addiction, sometimes we get really strong emotions, and it's like, oh my gosh, I have to give in to this emotion. It feels like I don't have a choice, versus a choice that you're making out of free will. Like, I want something so badly, I am going to choose to go for it. Like, is it a conscious choice? Do you recognize your power? Are you um kind of just giving in and letting things sweep over you, or are you choosing to follow this flow?
Well, that's a very, I mean, interesting question because when we feel emotions, I feel like we don't have a choice. Uh, I feel like it overtakes you and you feel compelled to maybe make certain decisions that you wouldn't otherwise make.
I think for me personally, I disagree with that because after a long time of being mindful, there's been a lot of situations where I've been able to look at it and say, okay, I could get angry like I would normally do, or I can go get myself some ice cream and celebrate the freedom of the rest of today. Like, I could make that conscious choice.
Mhm. Okay, so you're disassociating yourself from whatever is making you feel negative, right? Is that what you're doing to kind of help yourself not feel angry?
I think it's actually me choosing not to live in the past. I recognize that, yes, I was angry. I am angry. And then in the next few moments, I cannot be angry. So maybe I had an angry morning because I was dealing with some guy who I don't really like, but that guy is not going to be with me for the rest of the day. So do I choose to allow my emotions to stay that way, or
Mhm.
do I want to change them for myself? And I recognize that I don't like this person, and I recognize that I felt anger because I felt I wasn't enforcing my boundaries enough. But I can recognize that. And after I really recognize that for myself, then I can choose to move on
Mm.
because that emotion has served its purpose.
Do you feel like sometimes we might want to feel negative as a means to escape, um, feel victimized, or feel, just well up in our own sadness as a means of escaping?
I think definitely that can sometimes make us feel justified, or maybe feeling like a victim makes you feel more like um you'll hide away with someone and you'll be protected, and so it makes you feel more safe. Like um I think that sometimes it's a bad pattern, it's a negative pattern, it's like an addiction. Like every time you put that needle in your arm, you get this little burst of energy, and it just repeats and repeats, and it's a cycle that keeps carving itself deeper. But when we really pay attention to why am I choosing to make myself feel this way, we can notice whether it's a bad habit that has built up in you, or whether it's a conscious choice, like I am choosing to make myself feel bad because of this.
Right. So, yeah, I really like how you approach all of these questions. You basically are saying you're kind of like taking that power back. We're not controlled by our emotions. We have free will. And I think that's it's a really liberating thing to feel and to believe. Whether or not we really have free will, I have no idea. But let's just assume we do, and let's just live like that. So I think the takeaway would be yes, we have control, and we can choose to be mindful if we want.
I think it's all about awareness, yeah. And while we may not always necessarily be able to control what emotion we're feeling, we can choose to be aware for ourselves to sit with that emotion and to notice what it's telling us. Because um I would say by changing our emotion right now, we might not actually be changing that much in the outer world, right? But we're changing so much within ourselves.
Yeah, so I enjoyed discussing emotions, and kind of shedding light on something that I don't ever think about, but yet it motivates me in every corner of my life. So I appreciate this chapter on emotions and discussing it with you.
Yeah, I think just really taking that step to shine a light on your inner self, even if you're afraid of what you might discover, that's a really important step in our self-development. And I really appreciate you coming over and speaking on this podcast today. So thank you, Wendy.
Thank you, Zoe, and I'm looking forward to episodes 7, 8, 9, 10, however many to come.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening. If you listened all the way to the end, you're amazing. I hope this episode contributed to your day in some way. I love you, and see you guys next episode.
See you guys next time.